morning. Thank you very much for having me. What is clearly a very fantastic, exciting and innovative conference. I don't have any conflicts of interest. I do have a declaration, which is I am completely aware of the irony of, given what's in the news at the moment, a British person coming and talking about teamwork and good behaviour. Given the success of the conference, I'd like to invite you all to London and to form a government. If you wouldn't mind. What is really surprising, though, in the middle of the omnishambles that is British politics, one law has just been passed which is really relevant to what we're doing at the moment, which is now, inexplicably it's taken until 2019, it is now going to be mandatory for all children in our schools to learn CPR and resuscitation. And this has been the culmination of work by a large number of people over a ridiculous number of years. But everything we're going to talk about, certainly in the UK system, is probably going to be less impactful than that investment that we've made in our future, about which I had nothing to do. It's quite emotional, actually, coming back to Amsterdam, because the last time that I was here was in my other job. And my other job was as a rowing coach. There we go. I've definitely pressed it twice. No? It's going to move on in a second. And in 2014, after a period of time working alongside medicine, I actually left medicine for a bit and worked full-time for the British rowing team as a coach. I say other job. My wife didn't call it another job. She called it a midlife issue. But 3 years' worth of work culminated in being selected as the coach for the British lightweight women's squad. And we came to Amsterdam, to the Bosbaan, for the World Championships. And I brought with me 4 phenomenal athletes who were probably the strongest group of lightweights that we'd ever had. I might just have to press that. There we go. Probably the strongest group of lightweights that we'd ever had. And we came off a phenomenal training camp. We'd been in the Italian Alps, and we got very, very close in training to breaking the world record. So I knew how fast this group of people were. And it was probably the worst 6 minutes of my professional life, watching the final of that event, because those 4 phenomenal athletes, we came to Amsterdam, and for the 5 days before the race, everything went wrong. The conditions were terrible. The athletes were really unsettled. We couldn't adapt the boat to the particular environment that is the Bosbaan. There's a strong wind that comes down and gets funneled, and it makes the water really weird. It took me a long time to set the boat right. And then on the day of the race, one of the athletes forgot their kit, which is quite important. So I got a phone call about an hour before the race saying, "Is it all right if I race in my spare kit?" I was like, "No, it's the World Championships. That's not allowed." We had to send a truck back to the hotel, grab the kit. She had to get changed in the back of the boathouse. And the wind became really strong. And when the one thing the coach can do on the day of a race is decide how long the oars are going to be. And it's like choosing the gear in your car, but you can only choose it once. And if the wind is really strong behind you, then maybe you need a higher gear so you can go faster. And I ummed and ahed about what to do. And in the end, I made the oars a little bit longer. And then for the moment the race started, from stroke 1, I realized that this was a terrible mistake, because the wind was so strong behind them, their oars were not long enough, and I watched them go from first to second to third to fourth to fifth and sixth, and there's only 6 lanes. And the last 3 minutes I got to reflect on the waste of all this effort that had gone into this terrible one mistake. There is a reason, though, that I went and... Oh, actually, I probably should say that this lot won it. So that was also a bit painful. The reason I did all of this is because I got exposed to all of the performance psychology and the physiology resources that exist in the British Olympic system. And I learned a lot of ideas about how we perform and how we can improve performance. And then I did that so I could bring them back to medicine and pretend they were my own ideas. And one of the areas where I found this really useful was in our work in London with our advanced paramedic practitioners. So London is a crazy city, right? There's 10 million people. The ambulance service has 4,000 clinicians. And what that means is that each clinician only goes to 1 or 2 cardiac arrests a year. So the advanced paramedic program was created to bring a group of 20 and now 30 people together and give them advanced skills. That's what we thought we were doing. We were going to dispatch them to viable cardiac arrests and to other complex medical situations, and they'd be able to deliver sedation and difficult airway management and thoracostomy and surgical airway and all these things. And what we realized after putting a lot of investment into developing those skills is that those aren't the skills that make a big difference in most patients, as Mark alluded to. And that actually teamwork and leadership, and particularly making the team work for other people, is the critical intervention that makes a difference. And there's quite a lot of chat now in medicine, isn't there, about performance psychology, and we all learn about managing yourself and your managing your breathing and your self-talk and all those things. But that's kind of, I think, entry level for what we were asking these guys to do, which is to go into stressed situations and not just get the best out of themselves, but get the best out of other people. And one of the things that they did is they started downloading the defibrillators they went to. And one of the things we learned from that is, although externally pre-hospital resuscitation should be simple, right? Because we've got a flow chart, and there's some boxes with some arrows, so please turn up and do what the boxes say in the order that the arrows say. But when we downloaded the defibrillators, what we learned is that we were really bad as clinicians at shocking VF. And you think, that should be really simple. So we did what you would normally do if you identify that there are long delays to VF. We did some education and we told people off. And what we found is that that didn't make a difference. And further, what we found is that it didn't matter how senior you were. If you were first on scene and you were using a manual defibrillator, you were quite bad at shocking VF, and you were actually much better off having the fire brigade or the police go with an AED than a clinician to interpret the screen. So we thought, well, can 4,000 people be terrible at medicine? Probably not. And the problem is that governance is a process that's done in retrospect. And our understanding of the work was wrong, and our understanding of the nature of teams was wrong. So this is the International Space Station, as you can probably tell. And it's complicated. And by complicated, I mean it contains many, many small, intricate parts that are difficult to understand, but which follow each other, and there is a cause and there is an effect. And I don't know how the International Space Station works, but I'm pretty sure that there are clever people out there that can understand that, and if there's a problem, they can say, this is not working, and so that's not working. Complicated. International Space Station. Mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is not complicated. We can all understand mayonnaise, but it is complex. By which I mean that it is made up of an interaction of ingredients. And by adding one ingredient to another, you change them and you cannot unchange them. And you cannot take the mayonnaise and pick apart exactly what the egg is doing in the mayonnaise, because it's been changed by the other things in it. If we think of resuscitation as being complicated and people don't follow the flow sheet, then we think they must not be experts. But actually, resuscitation, and particularly pre-hospital resuscitation, is complex. All the different components interact, and that includes the scene, it includes the other people, it includes how the thing's presented. So we misunderstand the work, but we also misunderstand the nature of teams. So if you go, if you're in the NHS, you get to a certain level, at some point, it's very hard to escape being sent on management training. So you go on management training, and people who are experts in management come and talk to you about things like teams. And I think what they think we do in the hospital is maybe we've got a book of all the people who work in the hospital, and they've all done personality profiling, and they know what their IPTS, whatever it is, and they know what type of person they are. And we go, the patient's coming in, and Hans gets out the book and goes, right, we'll have that person and that person and that person. And then maybe we'll all get together, we'll have an away day, we'll write things on Post-it notes, and then we'll maybe write a mission statement, and we'll agree how we're going to work together, and then how we're going to communicate, and then we'll go and perform. And when people who don't work in our world look at our teams, if they've not performed, they find it quite hard to understand that we are not that team. The biggest criteria for being in a pre-hospital team is that you were nearest. Not that you were the most qualified, not that you're the most rested, not that you've not just come from something that's really difficult, but just that you were nearest. And people who join our teams come from different places, so the scene looks different to them as they arrive. They come from different professional places with different versions of good. So the police officer that arrives at a road traffic accident has a different version of what they're trying to achieve than the clinicians. And the fire brigade have a different version of what they're trying to achieve. The police need to maintain safety. They need to preserve evidence. They're serving the patient by preserving evidence. They need to get the road open again. They need to know, is this a crime? The fire brigade want to cut the car up. Sorry, the fire brigade are responsible for safety. We laugh. If you've ever cut a car up, it's awesome. But why do they want to cut the car up? Because they know that if you move the patient, you'll paralyze them, and that's their version of good. And there's been fights on scenes, isn't there, where clinicians have turned up and gone, the patient is too sick, just get them out. And it's because we've not recognized they're coming from a different place. Sometimes I think, take the patient out, and then you cut the car up, and we're all happy. So different versions of good, but also critically, different times. And that's really important because, as we all know, if an emergency call goes off in the ward, in the ED, anywhere, you turn up 30 seconds later, the thing looks different. So we are not those models of teams. And what we have to understand is this is the reality, the lived experience of work. It's complex, variable people. I am not the same today as I was yesterday. I'm not as capable in the morning as I am at lunchtime. I had an argument yesterday with the person I'm working with. It's different now. And the work is complex and variable. There is no, this is a cardiac arrest, here's a flow sheet. It's funny, isn't it? We talk about the pre-hospital environment like it's the moon. Like, we're in a pre-hospital environment now. Like, as human beings, we all understand that there is a pre-hospital environment, and it is different to in-hospital, but also each job is different to the next one. When you debrief our clinicians, these people we're asking to be leaders, and you think about the team dynamics, quite often people will say, well, it was very difficult. Everyone was very stressed. The crew were really hostile. It was really noisy. I couldn't work. And one of the things that we have to appreciate is that you cannot say, I don't want this team, thanks. Can I have the next team? This resuscitation team is no good, thank you. You go and stand over there. And Team B, you're up. So the fact that those people are stressed or difficult or hostile is not an excuse for us not to perform. And the fact that the environment is difficult to work in is not an excuse for us not to perform. What we need people to do is be experts at optimizing their environment, so moving the things that you can move in the place you're working to enable you to deliver the best job you can, but then to not need to be people that need a perfect environment to do a good job. That's the balance we need. One of the other things that people say a lot these days is everyone's bandwidth was maxed out. Is bandwidth a kind of a new term to people? No. So we've been kind of talking about it, certainly in UK medicine for a few years now, as a way of describing the way your brain deals with immediate information. And the point about your bandwidth is that it's finite. So however clever you are, in fact, being really clever doesn't help often. However clever you are, you have a fixed amount of ability in your brain to receive information, to perceive things from your five senses, from your spidey sense, from your sense of yourself, to process it, to make a decision, to take a deliberate action. And when that bandwidth is full, if you try and do more, you will fail. And the point about bandwidth is you cannot work harder to have some more bandwidth. And you cannot motivate other people to have more bandwidth. So a really good way of giving up 20% of your bandwidth is to not have a pee when you need a pee. Because does anyone here think they do a good job when they need to pee? Does anyone think they do a good job when they're hungry? Does anyone think they do a good job if they've had an argument with the person they're working with and now they have to collaborate? So our bandwidth is fixed and it's finite and you cannot have any more. So you have to work within it, because when you overwork it, you fail. But quite often what people will do, now we use this term, is they say, oh yeah, the team's bandwidth was really full. And I find that really frustrating in helping the advanced paramedics, because the question is, so what did you do about it? You can't just accept that the team's bandwidth was really full and so they couldn't work. What did you do about it? This bandwidth idea also speaks to information processing theory, and that's really relevant for communication on scene, particularly when you arrive in a leadership role. Information processing theory was actually a kind of a 1970s idea when they were trying to first off invent artificial intelligence. And it's the premise that to deal with information, your brain has to receive it and then direct its attention to doing something with the information. So if it's written information, when you read something and you see it with your eyes, you have to then hear it with your ears. The inner voice reads out what you see. When you get given something visual, you have to place it in your visuospatial scratch pad or sketch pad. It's the bit of your brain which works out where everything is and what's going on if it's new. It's like if I asked you how many windows are there in your house. Everyone would be able to tell me, but unless you're a bit odd, you don't have that information straight away. What you do is you think, okay, right, so there's one in there, there's one in there. I go into the back, there's one in there. That's your visuospatial sketch pad. And you can only pay attention to one of those things at once. So if you turn up on scene and someone is trying to tell you something while you're looking at something, one of those bits of information is getting lost. So how you enter that resuscitation scenario is really critical, and how you manage your attention. And sometimes you need to say, hang on, I can't pay attention to what you're saying right now. Can you tell me that again in a second? Otherwise, we assume information's been passed and it hasn't. So what's the skill we're trying to get these people to do? Part of it is reading the arc of the capacity of the team. What we realize with the VF is that the first person on scene has got like 10 things to do. And interpreting the screen is the one that is too much. It overwhelms their bandwidth. But when we're 5 minutes into the job, we can probably do that. So what we said to people was, everyone, doesn't matter how clever you are, whether you're the doctor, whether you're a paramedic, whether you're a technician, you put it in AED mode when you arrive. Not because you can't read the screen, but because you don't have capacity to read the screen. And if we're 10 minutes in, and now we've got a bit of capacity, we want to have a look and have another think, that's fine. You can change it over. And of course, the nature, as everyone works in prehospital care knows, is that there's no capacity at the beginning, then we get a little bit of control, and then we have too many people, and then the fire brigade wants to cut up the car, and we have no capacity again. We've got to be able to maximize the available bandwidth. Now, I haven't tried this, but I reckon if we turned up and said, has everyone peed? Does everybody need to pee? That wouldn't go down that well. So we can't do that. We can't give everyone a banana. But what we can do is take actions to maximize what's available and then recognize as the leader that there is no point asking someone to do something that they can't do. So we're only giving out the jobs in a time scale where people can take an action. You may have seen this video before. This is Oxford Street. It's a stabbing on Oxford Street a few years ago now. Quite often we show this video on London Hems to demonstrate the environment we work in. But I want you to look at the police officers. I've only got 3 minutes left, so you won't look at them for very long. But just look at what's filling up their bandwidth. He says. No, you're not going to hear them. There's about 10,000 people on Oxford Street, and those police officers, about 10 of them, they're trying to push back and protect all the people who are working on this person who's been stabbed from everyone around them. And they're being filmed, and it's really noisy. Their bandwidth is totally full up. And my point is that those are professional people who are motivated to help, and they are clever. But if I turned up and said to them, I need you to go to the Hems car, open the orange bag. In the orange bag, there are 3 black pouches. In the top black pouch, there are 2 scalpels. I need the one with 22 written on it. It's really important. I don't think that those police officers could do that. But that's a 5-step instruction, and we test people for dementia with 5-step instructions, and they haven't got dementia. So I'm sure they can do it, but in the context, they can't do it. And the point about leadership of a team is that if I, as the leader, ask them to do it in a context where they can't do it because their capacity is full, then it is on me. Oh, now you work. Right. So what can we do? Well, one of the things we can do is we can try and create a challenge mindset. And that is where people perceive that the resources they have to meet the task in front of them is greater than the task itself. The opposite of that is a threat mindset where you think, God, we have not got what we need to do that. I don't know how you face the All Blacks when they're doing a hacker, but I'm pretty sure that what you need to do is get yourself into a challenge mindset. And people talk about that for themselves. How do I place myself into a challenge situation? But what's really critical is how do you create confidence in the people that you arrive and meet, especially if you turn up and go, goodness me, you're all maxed out, you're all angry with each other. This is the team you've got, and how you frame the tasks through your language, through your body language, and through eye contact is critical in engendering a challenge mindset in those people. What you're trying to do is you're trying to say, through everything you do and through how you enter the scene, I'm glad I'm here in this disaster with you, even though you feel overwhelmed, because we are going to do good work. And that is the best way of getting the best out of the people that you've got. Now, you can't have a talk about CRM in resuscitation without a Formula One team, can you? And this picture is quite often used to illustrate the example of shared mental models. And a shared mental model is where the team all have the same information and the same mental picture, a same construct, the same schema of a workflow. And what that means is that work can be triggered by cues, and that it can be coordinated and it can be automatic. And I think that's brilliant if you are changing tyres on a Formula One car. That's a great sporting example for shared mental models. And there's some things we do that work like that. So there may be a little routine around airway management that works from a shared mental model. And I think it works really well in controlled environments. So in ICU, perhaps in theatre, that's a good idea. Now, bear in mind, I let you have a picture of the Netherlands beating Great Britain earlier on. Hockey and other ball sports, which are more chaotic, share themselves to a different idea, which is shared affordances. So an affordance is when an item gives you the opportunity to use it. So if this worked, then the button on this would be an affordance to move the slide. A coffee cup has a handle which gives you an affordance. In sport, an affordance is where an opportunity exists to take an action. So if a player at the back plays a long ball forwards into space, and the striker starts running into that space at the same time, it's not that the coach beforehand said, in this exact circumstance, we will do this. It's they've both seen that an opportunity exists because the defender is over there, they know how fast the striker can run, and they know how long the ball's going to take to get there. So both of them perceive an opportunity to act. And it's automatic, but it's not planned. And what we need to do, I think, in pre-hospital resuscitation is get to an idea of shared affordances, where collectively we've got a very clear idea on what we're trying to achieve, and everybody is in the right mental state with their eyes open to see the opportunities to act. And how do we deliver that? Bit by training, but mainly by talking about work. Talking about work is the most important intervention we can do at every opportunity. The more we talk, the more we share our ideas, the more we're vulnerable, the more we get people in the same page and the same opportunity. So I'm going to stop now by sharing the final mistake I made, because I didn't get in the right mindset. I made a bad decision because I let my bandwidth get full, and it was a really expensive decision. But the other mistake I made is I didn't see that team performance in the wider context. So I came back to medicine, went back to coaching a bit. I coached somebody else to Rio, and that went really well. But these guys, the people who came sixth, came plumb last in the final of the World Championships that I thought was a terrible failure, 2 years later, all won a gold medal. And I don't think they look back and see that as anything other than a stage in their progression. And when we talk about the Resuscitation Alliance, when we talk about debrief, when we talk about governance, it's really important that we also perceive our team's performance in that frame. Thanks very much.